think one of the things that we would like to talk to you about is just the early days of tape trading. So we know you were one of the first people to really tape not just the wrestling you were getting in Louisville, but try to find ways to tape wrestling from anywhere you could.
Yes.
And then trade it around. But, before we even get to that, there is something I want to discuss. One of the ongoing topics each week so far on the show has been the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. We've debated whether certain people should be in, certain people that are in who maybe shouldn't be in. I have been saying that I think Ole Anderson deserves to be in, and I even think the Junkyard Dog deserves to be in because he has a 5-year period where he was the Hall of Famer from the Mid-South territory, as well as a touring attraction, at some point too. So I do want to ask you about one that, has become somewhat controversial in the last few years amongst, I don't know if you want to call them the smart fans or the SMARC fans, but Satoru Sayama. And I bring this up because I'm sure that in your early days of tape trading, finding tapes of Tiger Mask must have been a pretty big deal.
Oh, my God, yes.
There's now this contingent amongst fans who think that he wasn't very good, and Bix may be one of them, actually.
What?
That Sayama wasn't very good. His psychology was terrible. His matches weren't that great. And he was only a star for 2 years. And I don't know. It's interesting. The time frame, the 2 years is an interesting part. But this sudden
you're shocking me because I thought the fuck that he was already in.
No, he is a Hall of Famer, but it's
okay. Oh, so people want to take him out?
I don't think people debate him as a Hall of Famer, though. I think they just debate whether his stuff holds up.
Oh, Jesus Christ! But here's the thing. To me, the reason why he had a very short period of time in the wrestling business initially, and he made who knows how many comebacks since then. But the run was because Inoki was fucking with his money. He was a major. Right. No, he was a major fucking draw, a major ratings draw, a major celebrity, and the first lighter weight major money draw in Inoki's company. And the reason why he left, and once he left and then went to the shoot group and it got all sideways, the magic was Tiger Mask, and he couldn't recreate it again. But it was because Inoki was fucking with his money and they had a business breakup. That's the only reason his run ended when it did. He would have been bigger. His stuff with Dynamite Kid, to me, stands up because if you look at that still today, if you look at a tape of the two of them having their matches, they were revolutionizing a lighter weight wrestling style in that country that led to a bunch of people revolutionizing a few years later here in this country because they were fans of those matches, but they still looked like they were having a competition. They didn't let the prettiness of the moves or the complicatedness of the spots interfere with the fact that they were simulating a contest. And so some of it did look ugly and did look painful and probably was. Dynamite Kid's in a fucking wheelchair, right? And he wasn't a fucking garden of roses to work with when he was simulating a conflict. So there was a lot of live rounds going on in those matches. I think they're as good today as they were then, and you can't hardly say that. That's Flair Steamboat quality stuff in the 80s that would still be as good today. And I think that they are.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is, and I'm with you, but certain people judge those matches almost against the high-flying matches that would come after it, as opposed to looking at them in a time capsule.
Well, I can actually tell you you're wrong about that, because most of the people who have become kind of anti-Sayama I'm not necessarily one of them. I can see where they're coming from, but it's more from the perspective of Fujinami, I'm watching this stuff from either from right before, where Fujinami or Gran Hamada or guys like that were maybe not quite as athletically impressive, but were fairly close. And they're kind of thinking, well, what was the big deal? And I guess what I'll ask you,
it was the gimmick. It was the fucking gimmick. What the fuck? Well, not only
to American fans, not to Japanese fans.
But no. And also, Hamada was actually, even to me, more athletic than Sayama.
Well, that's kind of what
Hamada was fucking fantastic, but he didn't have the pretty mask, and he didn't have those pretty tights, and he didn't have that smooth body. And fucking Fujinami was a little too fucking white bread, white meat, plain old regular fella guy at that point. And later on he became a nice heavyweight, and that's what you wanted there. But they had a comic book fucking hero that all the kids knew, They put a fucking cool looking outfit on him, and he fulfilled the Bruce Lee fucking fantasy that everybody was having in those days from 1972 until fucking mid-late 80s. Bruce Lee was the coolest thing in the world as far as fighting. And he had even worked the Bruce Lee gimmick in England before he came back, so he had all the moves. And it was just, and plus he was so fucking fast. He was faster than anybody else, but he still did the shit right. That's what he had. It was one of those things. It was the right place. They wanted the fucking kid's hero. They wanted a flashier star. He was homegrown. It wasn't like they were bringing in Dynamite from England or some other babyface from Steve Wright from Germany or whatever. All those people were foils for him. He beat people from every continent because he was a Japanese superhero. The only way they could fuck it up was Inoki fucked with his money because it was fucking bulletproof.
And that happened right around the same time that New Japan imploded. They survived, but that's when Shinma was ousted. There was a big
and it was Shinma's
scandal.
Gimmick. Shinma was the guy that was in charge of the whole fucking thing. So that's what. Once again, Tiger Mask would have probably been goddamn one of the top 3 for 10 fucking years if it not for all that shit going on.
Yeah. Well, going back to where we started with this tape trading, as I said, I assumed and
yeah, we just jumped off and went off on a fucking tangent. We're supposed to be paying attention here. Tape trading, yes.
Tape trading. So when you first started, when did you first get your VCR or beta machine, and what were you taping, and when did you start trading with other people?
I got VHS first because they were easier to find, and here's the thing: first, me and Bolin. Kenny Bolin lived in LaGrange in Oldham County. He lived on the second floor of a building on a hill right in the middle of downtown. And so if he put a antenna on his roof, he got great signals, especially from Cincinnati. But he also got Channel 4 from Indianapolis, so we could watch the Chic show from Cincinnati at his house. We both, in my house out in Middletown, I could get Channel 4 from Bloomington, Indiana, so we could both watch Bruisers TV. And then obviously we both had Louisville. And what I did was I put a 10-foot mast on top of my mom's tri-level house with a rotor on it so I could turn and then the biggest Weingart home antenna. It was 12 feet across. And the biggest one they made, and I put that up there, and I could turn the antenna in every direction, and I hunted wrestling programs. And we actually, at one point, Kenny Bolin talked to one of the smart kids at Oldham County High School who said, look here, if you take that fucking antenna wire that's attached to that TV and you put it in the phone receiver in some fashion and tie it around some of the wires and you make a long-distance call to a particular city, you'll be able to pick up those local cities' fucking TV stations. And we were actually going to try it one time, and his mother wouldn't let us take his phone apart. But anyway, so finally, he and I had been we were over at his house one Saturday morning, and after wrestling on Channel 3, we went over to Tice's furniture store because that's where they had one of the brand new VCRs. This was the fall of 1979. And that thing was beautiful. And they cost about a VHS machine that you could record to. And they just came out with a deal where you could record 4 hours on a 2-hour tape. You had the capability to do one or the other, right? And it was only $1,000 for that VCR. Wow. Fuck, we loved it. And he started going over there and taping Jerry Lawler's matches on the Saturday morning wrestling show from that point on. And God damn it, he was intending to buy the machine, and they were going to keep the tape for him, but he took so long before he ever came up with the money, the tape went somewhere. But in December, for an early Christmas present for myself, from picture money I made, I spent the fucking $1,000 and got a Magnavox VHS machine. And it actually had a remote control. You plugged the remote control in the back, and you could pause it or unpause it from the bed. That was the remote control. And it had a timer on it. You could set the timer to record any program in the next 24 hours, as long as it was on the channel that, you had the thing set on. So,
yeah.
Anyway, and I bought it to record wrestling, and that's the first program that I fucking recorded, and I still have the tapes that I recorded Saturday morning Memphis wrestling show on from that point forward. And then the next year I got a beta because the picture quality was better. And the only reason that they lost the format war was because the porn industry in Southern California picked VHS. And so I still have all those beta tapes, and the picture quality is tremendous. And I started again. Then the 6-hour VCR came out, and immediately I started trying to find tapes of wrestling from other places. And this guy in Detroit named Marty Slobin had contacts all over the place, and I got the first appearance of the Freebirds on Memphis TV from him, and also got Sheik's TV from him, but also got Georgia Atlanta TV with, DiBiase taking the 6 pile drivers, and and there was a small group of us, but we just tried to get everything positive. And Walt Wolanski really helped me out because he had a connection. Not only would he go to Japan every so often, but he had a connection over there that would send him the tapes, and he'd watch them and then send them to me. I'd buy them from him or trade him stuff or whatever. So I have every Baba and Inoki show from the 80s ever. Wow. I have on my desk shelves here, I have a complete library on Super VHS from one of the Japanese wrestling stores of every Tiger Mask match that ever aired on television. The copies of the laser discs of the Inoki and Baba greatest matches. I've got in the vault probably more than 3,000 individual VHS and beta tapes of wrestling from everywhere, from the late 70s, mostly 80s, early 90s, and then some stuff that you can find from the 50s and 60s when it's out there. But it's I'll never be able to transfer it all to DVD, but I'm starting to try with my favorite stuff first.
Well, as far as the stuff other people wouldn't have, is that primarily Memphis stuff? Like the stuff you'd dub off the masters and some of the stuff you taped yourself? Or is there other stuff besides Memphis that you got from someone within the business or whatever that you think probably isn't out there?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I started realizing about 15 years ago when I would say, well, everybody's seen that or everybody has that people are looking at me dumbstruck. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was like, oh, yeah, 20 years ago, everybody had that or everybody's seen that. It's so old. It's gotten so old. It's new again. It's out there on YouTube, a lot of it, but a lot of people don't know where to look. I've got one room with all this shit. And I mean, I have picked up quite a few interesting and strange and one or a few of a kind things. A guy gave me some old Cow Palace films from San Francisco, 8mm, just brief highlights. I've got highlights of the Atlanta City Auditorium in the late 60s with Gunkel and the Assassins and Enrique Torres but once again, silent film footage. But I've got stuff from Australia in the glory days, and some of the Bob Loose stuff that everybody's seen, but it's so cool, from Chicago, and just a little bit of everything here. You will never in this house, I will never be short of classic wrestling to watch. And I have about 4 or 5 different machines in every tape format to ensure that I can continue to watch it for quite some time.
When you were first trading tapes, though, what did you find was the consensus? Were there people out there wanting Memphis? Were they interested in Memphis? What was the thought about the territory?
Oh, yeah, especially when people found out that I, had good-looking stuff that, I could make a copy. A lot of people had shitty cable systems back then because a lot of people are too young to remember when you had cable, sometimes your picture was better if you had rabbit ears than on the cable systems. But you may be just old enough because you were in New York, Brian, to remember some of that. But
yeah,
a lot of cable systems had shitty pictures. My stuff looked good, and I could make copies of it. It still looked good because I never let my originals go. And people loved to see, especially Danny Davis, the Nightmare, my old partner at OVW. He was one of the early guys to get a VCR also. He liked to watch his matches and critique his shit. So he would tape the Jackson show for me, the matches from the Coliseum in Memphis on Monday nights where they would air in Jackson and Tupelo that already got Memphis TV. It was a secondary show. So I get matches like that from him. And Ken Wayne was a big early video freak too. And then some of the other, fans that wanted to trade back and forth. And as Atlanta TV spread because of the cable, that, was pretty easy to get. But some of the other territories were a little harder. You had to know people. And that was the key in trying to establish a connection. Well, I didn't have to just offer Memphis. I could offer, I've got a lot of other stuff, folks.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was like movies, because movies When I got my first VHS VCR, if you wanted to go into one of the 2 or 3 stores in a good sized town that might carry pre-recorded VHS that wasn't porno, actual movies like Star Wars, etc., they were $99 a piece if you wanted to buy them, or $20 a night if you wanted to rent them.
That's right.
So there was a big market in movies. But actually, after the first year or two, wrestling started outstripping it. And so the people had said, hey, I'll give you Raiders of the Lost Ark. No, just give me more of that Detroit wrestling.
So now when you go to Mid-South at the end of 83, you have this VCR and you have this beta machine at home. Did you bring one with you? And now, I'm just wondering, because I mean, you're a wrestling fan, and obviously
I'll tell you exactly what I fucking did. By then I had a VHS machine, I had a beta machine, and I think I had a secondary VHS. And I took my tapes have always stayed with me. I've gone through a lot of furniture. But I still have all of my original tapes. Yes, I set up a command center, and I had one machine set because in Alexandria, Louisiana, where we lived in Mid-South, we got TV stations from Lafayette, Louisiana, from Alexandria, from Monroe, I think one of the stations on our little cake, because the cities weren't that far from each other. It was a very weird setup. Anyway, and especially when they had Mid-South Wrestling and then they added Power Pro Wrestling, a secondary show. So I'd set one machine for one show, the other machine for the other show, blah, blah, blah. I have a tape of I started getting stuff from Bruce Pritchard in Houston, of Houston Wrestling with Paul Bosch, and our matches that we'd have there that they'd air on that TV show that wouldn't make the main Mid-South show. So I have most of the stuff we did in Houston. Joel Watts filled in a few holes for me later on because he liked Japanese wrestling. So I'd give Joel some Japanese stuff, and he'd give me Midnight Express matches they taped. And then when I went to Dallas, the same thing. I taped every show. If I was on the road, I set the VCRs. And then the same thing in the Carolinas got. You should have seen my fucking setup because. But now the Carolinas was a challenge because back then, once again, in the old days, the cable systems were fidgety, and maybe you could only record whatever your cable box was set to. Well, I had a variety of splitters and things I got from Radio Shack that would enable me to go into the tuners in each of the VCRs that I had. I was taping the 2-hour Saturday night TBS show, the hour Sunday night TBS show, 2 hours of syndication on 2 different stations that Crockett had in the Charlotte market, and then a half an hour Super Bout show that aired on Channel 3 in Charlotte as well. That was every weekend. So I have literally hundreds of tapes from my years living in Charlotte between 85 and 90.
Wow.
So is that what Super Bouts was?
And it wasn't just because I was the biggest wrestling fan in the world. At that point, at the level that we were at, especially working for Crockett with that talent roster was unbelievable, from Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes on down, and the Horsemen and the Road Warriors and Magnum and Nikita and and the Rock and Roll and etc. I watched back every single television performance that we ever did to critique in my head. Did my promo, did I say what I wanted to say? Could I said it better? With the matches, which moves are getting over, which ones aren't? What do we need to polish? So we'll talk about it in the car on the way to the next show. And then I also watched the other tag teams and some of the other guys to do their promos, not only to see if we worked with them, what their styles were and what they did in the ring and what they talked like, but also to see if we were still doing better than they were. Am I still out talking this one guy? Are we still out fucking wrestling these other guys? I kept an eye on that shit. So it was professional as well as being a fan.